I married a prince in 10 miles of red silk, only to see a familiar man in a prisoner's cage on my wedding day. They call me a substitute for the brilliant traitor, Charlotte. But as the medicine meant to make me sleep fails, I find a blood-red portrait of my own face in his study. Alexander holds me close, his blade at my throat. This is how you kill. Am I his beloved wife, or a bird trapped in a vengeful cage? On the day I married Prince Ming, Jing City was more magnificent than ever, my wedding train a sea of red stretching for miles. I was overjoyed at first. I lifted the curtain to gaze at the vast procession of my entourage, which seemed to stretch on forever. Alexander Yan must truly cherish me, I thought. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a prisoner's cart moving against the flow of the crowd. Why did the man in stocks and chains look so familiar? Through the gaps in the crowd, he seemed to see me sitting in my sedan chair. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, but he gave me a slight bow before the guards escorting him roughly shoved his head down. I was a little dazed. I asked Vivian Chen, who was beside me, "Vivi, do you see who's in that prisoner's cart?" "Him? Just some poor scholar. He landed a minor official post but was stupid enough to fall in love with Princess Ming." "Huh? Princess Ming?" I murmured. "Isn't that—" Vivian Chen looked at me, her smile strange and unfamiliar. After a long moment, she let out a sigh. "Yes. How dare he fall in love with you? So he deserves to die. You want to separate from me?" "Yes." Alexander Yan's lashes were lowered, his gaze merely glancing over the lengthy letter I had presented. A faint smile touched his lips. "Lottie, this is a petition for separation. You've written it as a husband's letter of divorce." My face flushed red, but I insisted. "It means the same thing." He finally looked up at me. This Prince Ming, this man who held military power in his hands, had a pair of stunning phoenix eyes. Whether making life or death decisions or expressing love and hate, those eyes were always captivating. Now his amber pupils held a hint of amusement. "Why, it's only been 3 days? Is Lottie already tired of me?" I fidgeted with the hem of my clothes, my confidence dwindling. "I do like you, it's just— This matter makes me unhappy. I don't know any of the servants, and they don't talk to me to pass the time. And they said, Alexander Yan was incredibly patient with me. What did they say? They said I'm a useless, leaky vase that's all for show, that I eat too much, do no work, can't serve you, and that I can't lay eggs." The attendant beside Alexander Yan couldn't hold it in. He turned away, suppressing a cough, clearly struggling not to laugh. Alexander himself looked both amused and exasperated. "Shadow. At your command. Useless people have no place beside the princess. Replace them with a new group that Lottie finds agreeable." "As you command, your highness." No. I quickly stopped Shadow. "I didn't come here to tattle on them. I want to leave the manor and make a living. I have to prove I'm not some leaky vase." Alexander Yan's voice was calm and steady, yet it carried an authority that needed no anger. "Lottie, inside this manor, you are the honored Princess Ming. Outside of it, you are nothing. How would you make a living? By selling your beauty? Once word gets out, do you want everyone in the prince's manor to be shamed along with you?" His sharp tone frightened me, and I meekly bowed my head. "As for the rumors in the manor, I will deal with them once I'm through this busy period. What are you still standing there for? Escort your mistress back." I, along with my very seriously written letter of divorce, was sent back to the Spring Garden Villa. The moment I walked in, I started to cry. "Vivi, he was so fierce. Boo-hoo." Vivian Chen impatiently stuffed a piece of peach blossom pastry into my mouth. "You call that fierce? Have you ever seen how he purges his enemies, how he interrogates serious criminals? You only avoid that side of him because you're the apple of his eye. Did you really think the prince whose power shakes the court is some spoiled playboy?" When I thought about it, she had a point. I had a very clear understanding of myself. I was a substitute, a pale imitation. I'd heard the servants whispering. The unforgettable woman in Alexander Yan's heart was a beauty of astonishing talent and strategy. Her name was Charlotte Shen, and I had no name. I couldn't remember my own origins. Vivian Chen told me we were once destitute, selling wine on the street, until Alexander Yan rescued us. He gave me the name Lottie. Basically, apart from our faces, Charlotte Shen and I couldn't have been more different. A substitute should know her place. Alexander Yan had married me with all the proper rights, showered me with care, and attended to every detail. Shouldn't that be enough? I tried desperately to convince myself of this. So, Vivi, who was that man in the prisoner's cart on my wedding day? Why are you still hung up on him? She looked like she wanted to leap over and cover my mouth. Are you crazy? That's a death row prisoner personally sentenced by your husband, Prince Ming. I lowered my eyes. Vivi, I won't hide it from you. I don't even remember his name, but whenever I think of his face, my head hurts so much. She took a deep breath, her expression complicated. After a moment, she summoned the nanny who attended me and gave her detailed instructions in a corner. I didn't know what she said, but I found out that night. She had the nanny increase the dosage of my sleeping draught. I love sweets and despise anything bitter. Unfortunately, I'm also a light sleeper plagued by dreams. Alexander Yan had the imperial physician prepare a prescription to help me sleep, and every time I had to drink it, it felt like torture. But this time, I took just one sip, and the bitterness shot from the tip of my tongue straight to the crown of my head. It nearly sent me to the next world. Is this stuff even meant for human consumption? Desperation breeds ingenuity. I shivered, and while the nanny turned to close the window, I swiftly tilted the bowl and poured all the medicine under the bed. Then I wiped my mouth sloppily. So bitter, Nanny, I want sticky rice balls. Nanny Yang coaxed me with a smile. How about we have some tomorrow? I'll get the princess some rose-scented salt water to rinse with. It's fragrant too. Before she returned, I was already sprawled on the bed. That single sip of medicine was so potent it made me drowsy. Just as I was drifting off, I heard a familiar male voice. Is she asleep? Yes. As Miss Chen instructed, we increased the dose by 1/3 today. Who gave her permission to act on her own? The voice suddenly turned icy, sending a shiver down my spine. It was Alexander Yan. What was he doing here so late at night? He wasn't going to take advantage of me while I was asleep, was he? Wait, wasn't I his wife? Why would he need to be as secretive as if he were having an affair? Besides, Alexander Yan was a perfect gentleman who hadn't so much as laid a finger on me on our wedding night. I was wrong. I suppose Miss Chen and I had the same concern. The princess mentioned that song boy again during the day. Oh, what did she say? Nothing much, just that thinking of him gives her a terrible headache. Is that all? Alexander Yan seemed to laugh. Through the screen, his voice sounded somewhat unreal. If Samuel Song knew what she's like now, he'd probably die of anger in his cell. But this is still far from enough. The way the servants in the manor looked at me was the way one looks at a forgery. Bah, I was a forgery to begin with. So when I suggested I wanted to raise some rare and precious flowers, the servants all hemmed and hawed, dragging their feet. It was Vivian Chen who couldn't stand it anymore. She pointed at the head nanny and said sternly, "No matter what, Lottie's status is Princess Ming. You can all be as negligent as you like, but when the prince arrives, we'll see if your heads stay on your shoulders." I could only chime in weakly, That's right. Only then did that group of servants bring me the flowers I wanted. In reality, what do I know about raising flowers? I just needed a place to dispose of the sleeping draught that left me muddled every night. So subtle. I really was a clever little devil. One day, I learned from Vivi that Alexander Yan was being kept overnight at the palace by the emperor. This was the perfect opportunity. Time was of the essence. That night, I poured out the medicine, changed my clothes, and knocked out the nanny in one smooth series of actions. Then I ran headfirst into Vivian Chen in the long corridor. We stared at each other, wide-eyed. Silence. More silence. I suddenly grabbed her hand. Vivi, I know that medicine is to make me sleep, and I know Alexander Yan is hiding something from me. I just want to go out and find some answers. Please, I'm begging you. She looked at me with an expression of utter exasperation. You're just you. Seeing my pitiful, tearful face, she finally sighed in frustration. The small gate on the west side has been in disrepair for years. Go quickly and come back quickly. And don't get me into trouble. I nodded eagerly. I knew Vivi always had my back. Finding the place where that man was being held took a great deal of effort. I even lost a pair of jade earrings along the way. When I arrived at the Ministry of Punishments, I confidently handed over a jade token. The man's expression changed. Princess Ming? He immediately switched to a fawning demeanor. Your Highness, Why have you come to such a place in the middle of the night? To find someone. I mimicked Alexander Yan, cherishing my words like gold. You're not here for that death row prisoner from the Song family, are you? The jailer exclaimed in shock. I glared at him angrily. Why ask so many questions? All you need to know is that I'm the one Alexander Yan cherishes most. Offend me, and he'll have your head. I had just learned that turn of phrase from Vivi. Finally, I saw the man, Samuel Song. I don't know how many rounds of torture he had endured. He was covered in blood, new and old wounds layered on top of each other. The sight was truly gruesome. His gaunt face was pale, and when he saw me, his pupils shook violently. Charlotte? Even he got it wrong. It seems I really do look just like the real Charlotte Shen. I'm Lottie, not the Charlotte Shen you all talk about, I said. He looked at me with a very complex expression, one that's hard to describe, but it was definitely not as simple as the falling in love Vivi had mentioned. You really have forgotten everything. Forgotten? I was bewildered. What do you mean, forgotten? He threw his head back and gave a bitter laugh. If not for the torture he had endured, this man would have been a handsome young scholar. Alexander Yan is truly ruthless, he said, biting out the first words he spoke about my husband. Miss Lottie, do you think he really loves Charlotte Shen? I returned to the manor in a daze, feeling as if I'd been plunged into an icy cellar, my hands and feet cold. If what Samuel Song said was true, Charlotte Shen, the most talented and beautiful woman in the Yun dynasty, the top female scholar, served as the minister of the Grand Court of Justice for the 3 judicial ministries. Her rise to power was meteoric. There was much controversy before she took office. It was the young lord, Alexander Yan, who personally promoted and supported her, silencing the objections of the court officials. Who would have thought that in her second year in office, Charlotte Shen would turn around and submit an official indictment to the emperor, accusing Alexander Yan of secretly harboring the descendants of convicted traitors, claiming he had treasonous intentions. Everyone said she had repaid kindness with cruelty, that she was cold-hearted and unfeeling. Later, the case was dropped due to a lack of evidence. The emperor still had need of Alexander Yan, so he had him released from the court imperial. Not only that, to show his favor, he promoted him to the rank of prince, and Charlotte Shen disappeared without a trace. I felt like I had fallen into a bottomless mire. Trembling, I asked Samuel Song, "Then what about you and Charlotte Shen?" Samuel Song closed his eyes and smiled bitterly. The accusations against Alexander Yan were true. I was the vice minister of the Grand Court of Justice, assisting Charlotte in the investigation. Of course, it's also true that I love her, which is why I did it, knowing full well the danger. Alexander Yan, he really imprisoned the descendants of those traitors? Yes. But none of that matters now. My time is short, I only hope you can be safe. Samuel Song coughed incessantly, spitting up thick, dark blood. He struggled to tear off the bandage around his neck and took out a small, oil paper packet from within. This is path-cutter powder, also known as the falling dream pill. It's colorless and odorless. Taking it will put you into a death-like sleep for 6 hours. Lottie, run! To be honest, I'm not what you would call a smart person. Thinking too hard gives me a headache, so I tend to ignore things I can't figure out. After all, Alexander Yan and Vivi always handled everything for me. But now, the clues from Samuel Song's lips have shattered my peace like a sharp blade. Then again, what Samuel Song said might not be true. So I made a ridiculous and daring decision. I brought snacks to him in the study, and while I was there, I slipped a sleeping pill into Alexander Yan's wine. Before long, his eyes became unfocused. I gently helped him up, my voice soft. You must be exhausted. Let me help you to the inner chamber to rest. He nodded slightly. You've become much more sensible. Then, with no guard up at all, he drifted off to sleep. After calling his name twice to make sure, I started searching through his many bookshelves and scrolls. I don't know how much time passed, but the incense in the burner had nearly burned out. I only found one item of interest, a scroll placed on the very top shelf. And yet, despite its position, it was free of dust. Clearly, it was taken down and viewed often. The moment I unrolled it, my breath caught in my throat. The face was identical to my own, but I knew with certainty that this was Charlotte Shen. Her eyes held a look of brilliant, untamed pride. The artist must have loved her deeply to have captured the spirit in her eyes so vividly. But this wasn't done with traditional ink brushes. It was painted entirely with crimson cinnabar. Usually, only portraits of condemned prisoners are drawn this way. This entire scroll, painted with nothing but cinnabar, was exquisitely detailed and utterly bizarre. The more I looked, the more panicked I felt. My hand trembled, and the scroll fell to the floor. It landed with a sharp clatter, having knocked a dagger from the shelf below it as it fell. My fingertips trembled, but my hand, it closed around the heavy dagger. Alexander Jan wouldn't place an ordinary weapon among priceless antiques. I took a deep breath, realizing the dagger felt strangely familiar. The carving was masterfully done, every detail of the auspicious dragon and phoenix perfectly rendered. The blade was as bright as snow, its cold glint flashing the moment it was drawn. My head, it hurts. As I tried to remember, the pain returned, sharper than ever before. I clutched the dagger, struggling to stay on my feet. Then I caught the sudden glimpse of a man's face in the bronze mirror. Immediately after, Alexander Jan wrapped his arms around me from behind. His eyes were clear and sharp, showing no sign of having been drugged. His well-defined hands closed over mine, guiding the dagger up, inch by inch, until the tip rested against my chin. With a slight twist, I felt a sharp sting on my skin. "Lottie, this is how you hold a dagger," he whispered, leaning close to my ear. "You have to stab like this to make it fatal in one blow." Fear. Overwhelming fear washed over me, threatening to drown me. "Why did you drug me? And holding this knife? Lottie, haven't I treated you well enough?" Even I, slow as I am, could tell he had been faking it. "Alexander," my voice trembled uncontrollably. "I wasn't trying to kill you. I was just trying to protect myself." Just then, Vivian Chen burst through the door. She froze, stunned by the scene before her. After the initial shock, she dropped to her knees with a thud. "Your Highness, the fault is mine and mine alone. I saw Lottie meeting with Samuel Song at night, and I failed to stop her." I didn't know why Vivi would bring up Samuel Song at this exact moment, but Alexander Yan, my husband, finally revealed the full aura and authority of Prince Ming, the one he showed to the outside world. He didn't say a word. His gaze simply traveled between the two of us. All the servants in the room were already kneeling on the floor, trembling. "So useless," he said with an unreadable smile, his head lowered. "Slap her." Before I could react, the color drained from Vivian Chen's face. Two stout nannies stepped forward, but I blocked their path. "Alexander, you can't hit Vivi. Yes, I am at fault. But if you hadn't hidden everything from me, if you hadn't forced me to drink those calming soups, we wouldn't be in this situation. If you truly want to mete out punishment, then direct it all at me." His eyes, deep and still as an abyss, rested on me. I expected my words to earn his fury. I thought he might hit me, curse me, or even cast me out of the manor with a letter of divorce. But none of that happened. He simply took my sleeve gently, and I followed him step by step back to the Spring Garden Villa. "We've spent so much time together. Maybe he still has some affection for me, right?" Click. Alexander moved so fast I didn't have time to react. A steel cuff was now locked around my right wrist. The other end of the chain was attached to the leg of the bed. Prince Ming." My panic was reflected in his unnervingly calm eyes. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I won't run around anymore. The last creature on this chain was a black fox, a tribute from the western regions," Alexander said, slowly and almost gracefully tightening the lock, click by click. "Unfortunately, it was untrainable. It refused to eat or drink for 3 days and starved to death." Tears slowly welled in my eyes. I suddenly understood what Vivian Chen meant when she described the prince as a decisive, ruthless man, like a demon from hell. But it was too late. He turned and walked away calmly. I lunged, trying to grab the corner of his robe, but I missed and stumbled, falling to the floor. A sharp, burning pain scraped my limbs, but I clung desperately to the hem of his garment, begging him through my tears. "Prince Ming, husband, Alexander, I was wrong. Please, unlock it. The shackle hurts so much." He slowly leaned down and placed a fleeting, butterfly-light kiss on the tear tracks of my cheek. "If it doesn't hurt, how will you learn your lesson?" Alexander knew my weak spots better than anyone. If he really wanted to punish me, it would be as easy as flicking his hand. I'm terrified of the dark and always need lamps lit through the night. So he ordered the servants to remove all the candles and lamps, sealing me alone in the bedroom with the doors and windows shut. I was all alone in the vast, empty room. I could see nothing, hear nothing. I spent my days and sleepless nights in a state of tormented fear. One day, I managed to grab hold of a maid. I gestured for her to take my jade hairpin and pleaded, "Will the prince come back? Please, I beg you, tell me." The maid rolled her eyes, her expression a smirk that was neither pity nor mockery. "The day after he locked you up, the prince went to the rainy pavilion and brought back 3 beauties, each one an absolute stunner. A few days ago, he went hunting out of town with Miss Chen, and it seems they stayed the night. So Princess Ming, what do you think?" A metallic sweet taste rose in the back of my throat. I clenched the corner of my robe. My heart felt like it was being slowly sliced apart by a dull blade. So what does that make me? I'm nothing. Servants of other masters get to share in their glory. But us? We're stuck with you in this sunless place. You should be eternally grateful we're even willing to serve you. The maid muttered curses as she left, and the room fell into dead silence once more. I tried to recall my first days in the manor. I tried to remember the simple, happy days I spent on the streets with Vivian Chen. Gradually, more memories seemed to surface, like scattered pearls being strung together. I was so afraid I would forget them again that I used my own blood to write them down, stroke by stroke, on a white silk cloth. I was imprisoned for 12 whole days. Then one night, amidst thunder, lightning, and a furious storm, a woman's sharp, mournful cries startled everyone in the Spring Garden Villa. Soon, the sound of hurried footsteps and the flickering lights of paper lanterns filled the winding corridors. Alexander Yan, wrapped in the damp chill of the storm, pulled my curled-up form into his arms. My fingers and wrists were covered in bite marks, bloody and mangled beyond recognition. My eyes were wild and vacant, and tear tracks crisscrossed my face. Alexander's voice was anxious and fierce. "What are you gawking at? Get a doctor. A bunch of useless servants who can't even watch one person." The room was brightly lit. I vaguely remember someone unchaining me and treating my wounds. I think I heard the bubbling sound of medicine being boiled. Finally, an old man's slightly fearful voice said, "The princess is fine now. She just needs to rest and recover." The servants all retreated in a near panic. Alexander examined my left hand and said softly, "I'm going to the palace tomorrow. I hear the Empress has some jade dew ointment. I'll get it for you. It won't leave any scars, don't worry." I glanced at it too. It doesn't matter. It's not my right hand, the one I write with. What does it matter if it's ruined? Alexander looked up at me, his eyes dark and bottomless. So I met his gaze and smiled. "The fragrance on you is rolled pearl curtain. It's an incredibly precious incense, worth a fortune for just a sliver. Let me guess, it's from those new girls who just joined the household, isn't it? It's quite impressive that you rushed over from so far away." "You've been acting all this time?" A flicker of surprise crossed his long, elegant eyes. He quickly added, "Or have you remembered?" "Remembered what?" I countered. Alexander said nothing, coldly dropping my hand. "Don't play this kind of trick a second time." He was about to leave. But I had gone to such lengths to stage this drama. How could I let it end here? I continued. "You can't forget Charlotte Shen. Even after she betrayed your kindness and nearly got you killed. But I hear Miss Shen's whereabouts are unknown. With her proud nature, do you think she killed herself? The woman you hate to the bone but can't have, who doesn't even care if she lives or dies." Alexander whirled around, his gaze sharp enough to kill. "What a great humiliation that must be for you, Prince Ming. So, you would rather defy an imperial marriage decree just to bring me, her counterfeit, into your manor?" This was the first time I had heard such gritted teeth fury in Alexander's voice. "You are nothing more than a pet bird I keep. What's the fun in keeping a plaything?" I curved my lips into a smile, one I had practiced in my mind countless times. "Alexander, don't you just want to continue your battle with Charlotte Shen?" "I can be Charlotte Shen." During those dark, sunless days of my imprisonment, I did 2 things. The first was to lure Alexander here. If he had completely forgotten about me, I would have been left with no way out but death. The second, and more important thing, was that I pieced all the details together. My memory is gradually returning. For instance, there was never a counterfeit. I'm Charlotte Shen. And another thing, Samuel's song is from the Grand Court of Justice. He was also my student, he had feelings for me, and I dragged him into this messy affair of denouncing Prince Ming. But there are still more mysteries. To solve them, I have to keep playing this game with Alexander Yan. Greetings, Princess Ming. Master, the prince requests your presence at the floating pavilion. The maid who had given me such a sour look days ago now approached eagerly, carefully arranging the tassels on my cloak. My gilded nail guard lifted her chin. I caught the flicker of fear in her eyes. You're quite the master of changing faces, I said with a smile. She didn't dare speak and could only force a smile. Such talent is wasted on a servant in this manner, I said unhurriedly. Head stewardess, take her away. Send her to a theater troupe. The maid went from disbelief to her knees, begging and sobbing. Every servant in the garden was horrified. I, however, walked away with a flick of my sleeve, my expression unchanged. The floating pavilion was filled with graceful dancing and soft music. I saw the new girls who had recently entered the manor. They were indeed beautiful, each with her own unique charm. They saw me too. Perhaps they were thinking of the rumored ruthless and cold Charlotte Shen, head of the Grand Court of Justice, because they awkwardly moved away from Alexander and bowed to me. Greetings, Princess Ming. The candlelight flickered. Alexander seemed veiled in drunkenness, his captivating eyes soul-stirring. He smiled and beckoned. Charlotte, come here. I stepped forward and took a silk handkerchief from my sleeve, intending to wipe the lingering wine from the corner of his mouth. But the next moment, a fierce kiss descended upon me without warning. His strength was so great, it felt like he was pinning me in place. I was the one who personally promoted you to head of the Grand Court of Justice, he growled, gripping my chin and forcing me to look at him. Charlotte Shen, what gave you the right to betray me? How could you have the heart to betray me? The hatred in Alexander's eyes was sharp and clear. I think I was beginning to understand his tangled love and hate for me. The man was truly insane. But strangely, when he looked at me with bloodshot eyes and questioned me so fiercely, my own heart ached in response. Your Highness, we have company, I reminded him, forcing a smile. Don't lose your composure. His hand flung me away. Didn't you say you could be a good Charlotte Shen? When has Charlotte Shen ever cared what others think? Alexander laughed, his voice cold and venomous. You're not as good as her. You can't even be a decent shadow. I almost laughed out of sheer anger. How could he find fault with my portrayal of myself? Does he know me better than I know myself? But my laughter died in the next moment. He turned to the trembling beauties and said, Aren't you all curious why she gets to be Princess Ming? In terms of looks and talent, none of you here fall short. But when it comes to certain skills, you all have a long way to go. I was utterly stunned, staring at him in disbelief. Those elegant, noble hands were calmly untying his jade belt. Alexander. Stop. Are you insane? With everyone watching, I grabbed his hand desperately, my breaths coming in short, rapid gasps like a dying fish. And in that very moment, countless fragmented memories came flooding back. This student greets your lordship. That's incorrect, isn't it? You should refer to yourself as a commoner. Ah, forgive me, your lordship. Though I am a woman, I have studied for 10 years no differently than any man. I only ask for your lordship's permission to have an audience with the emperor. You've got some nerve. What is your name? Charlotte Shen. Over 200 scholars passed the imperial exam this spring. Why should I make an exception for you? Because I am no ordinary person among those hundreds. You almost lost your life in the last case against the vassal lords. Are you scared now? With your lordship's protection, I fear nothing. How did I protect you? Both openly and behind the scenes. I know, and I have always been grateful. If you're so grateful, then you should repay me. Tell me, how do you plan to do that? Well, I could treat you to a feast at the Drunken Spring Tavern, or perhaps a painting by the master Julian Zhou would suffice. His work is unparalleled. Just a painting? How can that be called unparalleled? In my eyes, the only thing unparalleled in this world is Charlotte Shen. All these years, I've lived on the edge of a knife. Death meant nothing. But to think the one to strike the blow would be you. Having come this far, do you have any regrets? Charlotte does not regret it. My hair had come completely undone, partially hiding my tear-streaked, pain-twisted face. This went on until Vivian Chen arrived. I saw a flash of hatred in her eyes, but I had no strength to dwell on it. All I knew was that Alexander had casually tossed me aside. Vivian's voice was respectful. "Greetings to the prince and princess. Reporting to the prince, the criminal Samuel Song is to be executed tomorrow at the 1/4 past noon. The emperor's wish is for you to oversee the execution." My back tensed involuntarily for a moment. From above me came a man's cold laugh. Is the princess feeling cold, or is her heart aching? I clenched my fists secretly and looked up, returning an identical smile. "I'm afraid I don't know who this Samuel Song is." Alexander was testing me, as I expected. He was trying to see if I had merely regained my wits, or if my memories of who I am had also returned. But I couldn't show any weakness, at least, not until I had unraveled the whole story. For now, I was just imitating Charlotte Shen. The execution ground was next to the hunting grounds on the city's outskirts. Alexander brought me with him. I kept my fists clenched, because hidden under my fingernails was the rest of the sleeping powder. Even if there was only a sliver of a chance, I had to save Samuel Song. But when I arrived at the execution ground, I realized how naive I had been. Layers of guards surrounded the high platform. Samuel Song was dragged onto it by an iron chain. Aside from the slight twitching of his limbs, it was hard to tell if he was even alive. Even though I had steeled myself for it, I still had to turn my head away, unable to bear the sight of the horrifying trail of blood he left behind. "My lady," Alexander said, turning to me with a smirk, "I'll give you a chance to prove you have nothing to do with this condemned man." The dagger lay quietly in his outstretched palm. My fingertips trembled slightly, but I still took the hilt. Alexander's smile widened, the guards on both sides parted, and I walked up the stone steps with heavy feet. Samuel Song was in an even more wretched state than before. His face was almost unrecognizable. Blood just pooled at his chin and dripped down. He looked at me through his messy hair, his eyes filled with 1,000 emotions. Facing him, I tried to mouth the words, "Saving you. Don't speak." Then I leaned down slowly. Just as the blade was inches from him, I raised my other hand. But suddenly, he grabbed my hand. His stick-thin arm erupted with shocking strength, pulling the dagger with it and plunging it straight into his own chest. I was horrified, speechless, unable to utter a single word. "Why? Why? I'm sorry," he murmured. "Charlotte, I'm sorry." I stared into his eyes, which were unusually bright in the last moments of his life. They were filled with intense guilt. The last word he said was fire. Samuel Song's body was hung up for public display. I managed to keep my expression calm, but inside, my heart was in turmoil. There had to be a memory I was missing. Or perhaps I had been kept completely in the dark from the very beginning. Returning to the manor, I ran right into Vivian Chen. Seeing me, she came forward with a smile. "That boy is finally dead. That's one less thing to worry about. I imagine the rift between you and the prince will soon be mended." I gave a faint smile in return. "You really want us to reconcile?" "Of course. And that night you went hunting with the prince and stayed out. Did you enjoy yourself?" Vivian's smile froze. I tapped my temple and her face grew even paler. What have you remembered?" Just as I thought. This woman, from the moment she deliberately allowed me to see Samuel Song, only to turn around and report it to Alexander, I knew I couldn't trust her. Besides, if she truly came from the same background as me, even as my closest companion, how could she be so familiar with the inner workings of the prince's manor? She must be one of Alexander's people. And her feelings for him were clearly not as simple as a subordinate's for her master. "Miss Chen, I have no desire to deal with you right now." I subtly put some distance between us. "I also hope you won't touch me. Otherwise, when it comes to the prince, you've been by his side long enough. You should know his temper. So watch yourself." Alexander didn't return to the manor. He probably went to the palace to report what happened. I went back to my room alone, dismissed all the servants, and lit a candle. What did Samuel Song's last word mean? Fire? My head began to ache again. Frustrated, I swept the papers I'd written my theories on into the incense burner. Flames instantly engulfed them, blurring the writing until it all turned to a pile of ash. Wait, I think I understand. I quickly pulled a slip of oil paper from the hollow of my hairpin, one I'd once used to wrap medicine. I carefully moved it toward the candlelight. As the flame licked the bright yellow paper, faint patterns began to emerge. I bit my fingertip and smeared the blood across the surface. The patterns were instantly dyed red. I began to read, word by word, my initial excitement giving way to horror. I read it over and over, my reflection in the bronze mirror growing as pale as snow. Charlotte Shen. At just 17, she passed all 3 imperial examinations with top honors, becoming the youngest top scholar in the dynasty's history. Her fame was unparalleled. Her gender divided the court. Some tried to block her path, but in the end, she found a protector in the young lord, Alexander Yan. This matched the memories I had recovered. The two were inseparable, their bond well known throughout the capital. The famously aloof young lord even invited her to banquets at his home. It was rumored they were a perfect match, a celebrated pair in the court. At 20, Charlotte Shen was appointed head of the Grand Court of Justice, her influence at court immense. But it was then that she reported her closest friend, Alexander Yan. As a member of the imperial family, he had been secretly sheltering the descendants of a convicted official in his manor, hiding them from the world for years. Regardless of whether the young lord harbored treasonous intentions, the act itself could be construed as conspiracy to rebel. The 3 judicial ministries launched an immediate investigation that very night. They sealed the prince's manor and detained him in the court imperial. My head felt like it was splitting open. Tears streamed down my face, uncontrollably, like a collapsing dam. The world called Charlotte Shen a faithless, treacherous woman. But who could know that her pain was no less than Alexander's? When she submitted her report, she included a personal addendum pleading to be exiled to the frontier for life to atone for her sin. That day was supposed to be Alexander's birthday. That day, the prince's manor was dark and deathly silent. No one would have guessed that Charlotte Shen would arrive there late at night and stumble upon a secret conversation between 2 people. The man was her own prized protégé, Samuel Song, a magistrate at the Grand Court of Justice. The woman's voice was unfamiliar. She was one of the descendants of a convicted official living under Alexander's protection. Samuel Song did not come from a poor family. His father had once accepted bribes and had been personally executed by Alexander, planting a seed of deep-seated hatred in the young magistrate. So he told Charlotte that Alexander was only sheltering the descendants of convicted officials to use them as pawns. And the woman's testimony seemed to confirm it. Already burdened by a guilty conscience, Charlotte believed it all. The weight was too much to bear. She sealed the doors and windows of her room, lit a charcoal fire, and attempted to take her own life. Of course, she didn't succeed. And so here I was with a fragile constitution and a muddled mind. So this was the truth. What, crying already? I don't know when he appeared, but Alexander was standing before me. I finally understood the mix of hatred and conflict in his eyes. He had saved the person he loved, the very person who had nearly sent him to his death. Alexander, my voice trembled slightly. I am Charlotte Shen. The candlelight danced in his dark pupils, but they revealed nothing. Well then, head of the Grand Court of Justice, is there something you wish to say to me? What could I possibly say? It was, in the truest and most bitter sense, my just deserts. The ever-so-clever Charlotte Shen had finally been pierced through the heart by the blade of her own cleverness. Samuel Song told me that the people you were sheltering were pawns you were training, pawns to be used for the rest of your life. There was someone else there who confirmed it, and so I... He let out a dry laugh. Sheltering the descendants of convicted officials. At best, it implies you believe them innocent. At worst, it suggests you're plotting something. His narrow, phoenix-like eyes stared at me. Charlotte Shen, you chose to believe the latter. You believed that I, Alexander Yan, was that kind of person. Standing before me, he undid his outer cloak, unfastened his jade belt, and slipped off his inner shirt, one piece at a time. I saw the horrific, crisscrossing scars that covered his upper body. Many courtiers were delighted to see me locked up. They took very good care of me. My trembling fingertips traced over each scar. Such a proud and solitary man. He had given his trust to his closest friend for the first time, only to have his home ransacked and be thrown in prison on his birthday. What kind of pain must that have been, for both body and soul? "Alexander," I whispered, "why didn't you kill me?" He looked down and chuckled. Indeed. The old emperor weighed his options and decided he couldn't afford to get rid of me, not with so many of my spies still in court. So he turned you over to me. I could have killed you at any time. Why didn't I take my revenge? Perhaps it's because I wanted you to tell me the truth yourself. I wanted to wait until you regained your senses, and then hear your motive from your own lips. I see. I sighed, rose to my feet, and straightened my robes before kneeling properly before him. Prince Ming, you have your truth. Whether you kill me or flay me, I, Charlotte Shen, will accept my fate without complaint. I lowered my head and waited quietly until his voice came from above me again. Charlotte Shen, for someone so clever, you can be remarkably dense. What do you mean? I asked, confused. Then foolishly, do you want me to kill myself? How did I ever fall for someone like you? Suddenly, my heart felt as if it were soaking in bittersweet tears, becoming impossibly soft. I gently tugged at the corner of his sleeve. Alexander, since it's come to this, can we start over? He said nothing, so I grew bold. I wrapped my arms around him, stood on my tiptoes, and kissed him, clumsily and without any grace at all. Who knew that a man so decisive and ruthless could have lips so soft and cool? I pecked at them here and there until I was suddenly swept off my feet and into his arms. The man's voice was low and slightly hoarse. Charlotte Shen, you brought this on yourself. I smiled, my eyes crinkling. You work so hard on court affairs day and night, I wonder if you have the stamina for this. Behind the beaded curtains, the scene was full of charm. Alexander slept beside me. Before we drifted off, he had murmured my name, again and again. Charlotte Shen, Charlotte Shen. They say shared affection can clear away the smoke of battle. But there was too much between us. The treacherous currents of the court, the past betrayal, the incitement of those around us. All of it was like a wall of solid ice. Could we really go back to how things were? Alexander. I figured out where this dagger came from. We were hunting in the countryside. He had just won a round of applause by bringing back a live deer. I rushed over to him, excitedly gesturing. Look, I designed this myself. There's a hidden mechanism right here. See? Impressive, impressive, he said distractedly, telling his men to build a fire for roasting meat. It was the only reply he threw my way. I followed him, dissatisfied. Hey, don't you think I'm brilliant? Ha, men are so insincere. Otherwise, why would you treasure this dagger enough to keep it in your study? He finally glanced at me, his eyes filled with exasperation. Lottie, during your time at the Grand Court of Justice, you designed 3 secret prison cells alone, not to mention countless little gadgets like this. Back then, everyone was terrified of you. The space 3 feet around your desk was always empty. What? I had a habit like that? I sheepishly put the dagger away and squatted beside him, waiting to scrounge a meal. Alexander carved the roasted leg of lamb, sprinkled it with pepper and crushed fragrant leaves, and handed it to me. I quickly put on a flattered expression and leaned in close. How could I dare to eat before you, my prince? You must be exhausted. My heart aches for you. The soldiers all looked away. Some covered their faces, others coughed. Even food can't shut your mouth. I pestered him to feed me, but my heart wasn't filled with sweetness. Instead, I felt like I was walking on thin ice, carefully trying to mend our broken love. Neither of us noticed the venomous glare coming from the bustling crowd behind us. My prince, the emperor has sent a decree. You are to report to the palace at once. A captain suddenly appeared, breaking the beautiful moment. Alexander frowned slightly. I said, I'll go with you. There's no precedent for a female relative to enter the palace so casually, Alexander said, taking my hand. He secretly wrote a character in my palm, then stood up and ruffled my hair. Be good. I'll be back soon. I tilted my head. Then should I wait for you in the bedchamber? When will you be back? Alexander absolutely knew I was doing it on purpose. His ears turned red as he fled under the watchful eyes of his men. The character he wrote was caution. I quickly understood Alexander's concern. Both in the past and now, 2 brilliant minds joining forces in court would make any ruler uneasy. As they say, a monarch cannot sleep with a tiger by his bed. The fact that the emperor had handed me over to Alexander for judgment was proof enough. He wanted nothing more than for us to destroy each other. Therefore, I could no longer afford to display my true capabilities. But this was perfect. With Alexander out of the manor, I had something else I needed to do. I had to go to the forbidden area in the rear garden of the prince's manor. That was where the descendants of the convicted officials were once housed. If I remembered correctly, those who were obedient were allowed to attend classes in a study, while the unruly ones were imprisoned there. What I had to do was find those people and ask them myself. In their eyes, was Alexander a savior or a manipulator controlling everything? The rear garden was remote and in disrepair. It didn't look like anyone had been there for a long time. I slowly stepped into the ancestral hall. Another fragment of memory seemed to surface, but this time the headache wasn't as severe. Following the memory, I moved the prayer cushion in front of one of the statues. An iron ring turned with a soft click. Rumble. With a heavy, grinding sound, a deep, dark opening appeared. I suppressed my instinctive fear, grabbed a candle from the altar, and slowly descended the steps. Just as I thought, this was an underground prison. Alexander Yan, may you die a horrible death. I had just turned past a stone screen when I heard the loud curse. Following the sound, I came face to face with a group of people locked in a deep pit. Charlotte Shen, the man who yelled, was even more surprised to see me. You're still alive? If you don't want that mouth of yours, feel free to donate it. There were about 20 people, men and women, shackled by their ankles in the pit. And yet, these people, they didn't look particularly miserable. In fact, aside from the shackles, they looked no different from any other young masters and ladies. When they saw me, they all stared as if they'd seen a ghost. I cleared my throat. Everyone, I began, trying to keep my voice gentle. What happened back then was tangled in plots and conspiracies, and it ended without a clear resolution. I, Charlotte Shen, have come today because I need to know the truth. How did Alexander Yan treat all of you? May he die a horrible death. The loudmouth from before didn't even need me to ask again. 2 people covered his mouth and dragged him back. Pay him no mind, my lady. In his eyes, no one in the world deserves to be alive. One of the young women spoke softly. Lady Charlotte. You can just call me Charlotte. The woman smiled but insisted. Lady Charlotte, in our hearts, we don't think you did anything wrong back then. And neither did Prince Ming. I stared at her. This was an unexpected answer. Why? One must do their duty according to their position. You were the head of the Grand Court of Justice. Even with the rumors swirling, you were simply doing your job. If you had ignored right and wrong because of a personal debt of gratitude, that would have been truly terrifying. As for Prince Ming, he is a member of the imperial family. If one were to investigate closely, which prince is truly without blemish? I nodded and sighed. You are very wise. Then why didn't you? Because I didn't dare to gamble, the woman said, her voice faint. It's true that Prince Ming promotes people based on merit, but it's also true that he is ruthless and decisive. I was afraid that once I agreed to serve him, my life would no longer be my own. So, it's not a bad idea to stay here, enjoy the free food and lodging, and think it over some more. Yeah, that's right. Me too. Was this a prison for the children of criminals or a nursery for a bunch of pampered ancestors? Just as I was rendered speechless, a soft female voice came from behind me. Lady Charlotte, would you be interested in hearing another side of the story? The next moment, something sharp struck me in the back, and I stumbled helplessly into the pit to my right. As soon as my feet hit the ground, shackles snapped shut around my ankles. I looked up in shock to see a slender figure walking slowly out of the darkness. Vivian Chen. This secret chamber consisted of a central path with deep pits on either side. At this moment, Vivian Chen was walking toward me, giggling. Of course, once it's done, Charlotte Shen will be half dead. Then you can move in when she's at her weakest. That's the best way. My pupils contracted violently. That voice, it was the other woman who had spoken with Samuel Song back then. It was her. It was really her. Well, head of the Grand Court, does that sound familiar? I stumbled back a step. I should have known it was you, I said, my voice cold. Your supposed devotion to Alexander was the only thing that made me hesitate. She smiled, fiddling with her painted fingernails. That fool Samuel Song, he thought he could have you by working with me. How ridiculous. He could never figure it out. If I love Alexander, why would I testify against him? Because I calculated that the emperor wouldn't kill Alexander. At most, he'd be stripped of his title and exiled. And I would stay by his side through thick and thin, sharing his glory and his disgrace. He would surely fall in love with me over time. Vivian's smile widened, her face twisting with it. I had it all planned. You were supposed to die. Samuel Psalm was thrown in prison, but Alexander actually saved you. Why? The last missing piece of the truth fell into place. I felt no great surge of sorrow or joy, only a profound indifference as I looked at her. You know the cause and effect better than anyone. He doesn't love you, it's as simple as that. Vivian Chen was as expected, enraged. She laughed hysterically. Ha ha ha, I know. It doesn't matter. The real show is just beginning. As she finished speaking, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the other end of the corridor. Alexander and several of his personal guards arrived. The look in his eyes as he saw me was one of unconcealed anxiety. Lottie! The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. So that was it. Vivian Chen had been lying in wait, all to play the part of the oriole. Prince, you've finally come. Vivian Chen's voice trembled with a restrained, feverish joy, her eyes fixed solely on him. Everyone else, leave. Alexander Yan, I only want you here. He nodded, and the guards slowly retreated. The vast underground stone chamber fell into a deathly silence. My prince, is there anything you'd like to say to me? I was too merciful, letting you live this long. Alexander Yan's long, elegant phoenix eyes were utterly cold. Vivian Chen must have expected this. The anticipation on her face twisted into a cold sneer. Good. Very good. Alexander Yan, you're familiar with how the mechanisms in this dungeon work. Vivian Chen gestured toward the deep pit. When I turn the stone disc in my hand, a turn to the left, and the people on the right will be riddled with arrows. A turn to the right, and the ones on the left meet the same fate. So, my prince, which will you choose? At her words, both my expression and Alexander Yan's fell. This was far more complicated than simply choosing who to save and who to kill. If Alexander Yan chose to save those children of disgraced officials, he would have to watch me die. But what I feared most was that he would choose to save me, as that would confirm my old suspicions. That all these people were nothing more than disposable pawns. If that happened, even if I survived, a shadow of distrust would fall between us, haunting us for the rest of our lives. Prince, I know you are extraordinarily skilled, but from this distance, if you can't kill me in a single strike, then my choice will be to kill Charlotte Shen. Strangely, as I stared at Alexander Yan's face, I found myself, actually, faintly anticipating his decision. I'll give you the time it takes for one incense stick to burn. Alexander Yan listened patiently to her long list of conditions, then simply raised an eyebrow. Tedious. Then, before our very eyes, he leaped without hesitation into the pit where I stood. I gasped. Of course, it had to be him. This was so like him. Even now, on the brink of life and death, he smiled at me. Lottie, I made it back in time, didn't I? He said, taking my hand in his. Afraid to live and die with me? Huh? Vivian Chen was clearly both stunned and furious. After a moment of dumbfounded silence, she burst into wild laughter. She laughed until tears streamed down her face, like a woman possessed. Fine, Alexander Yan, you knew I loved you. You're just counting on the fact that I love you to the bone. In that case, she lifted the control disc, her voice seething with hatred. In that case, all of you can just go to hell. I heard screams and cries from the other side of the pit. I could even hear someone praying for their next life. The dungeon erupted into chaos, punctuated by Vivian Chen's maniacal laughter. But Alexander Yan just pulled me into his arms and bent down to kiss me. And then, nothing happened. That's right. After Vivian Chen frantically slammed the mechanism, nothing happened at all. I placed my hand against his chin. Hey, that's enough. Is this really the time or place? Alexander Yan blinked, a rare look of bewilderment on his face. Are you surprised? I shrugged. Charlotte Shen, Chief Minister of the Grand Court of Justice, built her first secret chamber with mechanisms at the age of 19. It was called the Chunyu Cell. The blueprints for the second were sold to an organization of assassins, and the third is called the Withering Bloom. I took Alexander Yan's hand and, in one smooth motion, tapped a sequence on the stone wall to our right. An iron cage dropped from the ceiling, trapping Vivian Chen inside as it landed with a heavy thud. This, perhaps, was the one thing Vivian Chen truly hadn't expected. Alexander Yan clapped slowly, worthy of the name Charlotte Shen. However, it was clear he hadn't anticipated this either. His expression was complicated, and the emotions in his phoenix eyes, framed by thick lashes, were impossible to read. I hooked a finger in the collar of his robe and gave him a charming smile in return. "Isn't it exhilarating to finally meet your match? My prince, you and I? We have all the time in the world."